Everybody likes a good diamond in the rough. Today, I want to talk about 3 league winners that you can find in the later rounds. Let's go. First, I want to talk about Anthony Richardson, the highly touted rookie quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. He obviously has the rushing ability. He has comps to Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, all those guys. And he's being drafted right now as the 11th QB off the board in the 13th round. You could punt the QB position and pick up Anthony Richardson later in drafts, which is crazy to me. I understand usually rookie quarterbacks don't do well, and it takes them a year or two to acclimate. But with the rushing upside of Anthony Richardson, he's somebody that has to be put on notice. For instance, let's look at some stats. The top 10 quarterbacks last year. So we're talking Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Geno, Justin Fields, Kirk, T-Law, all those guys. Those guys averaged about 90 attempts, about 480 yards, and about 5 touchdowns on the ground. Is that obtainable for Anthony Richardson? Obviously. But let's look into it a little bit further. Those guys also averaged over 4,000 passing yards, about 28 touchdowns, and about 10 interceptions. Is that doable for Anthony Richardson? Maybe. Let's take it one step further. Let's look at the quarterbacks, out of the top 10 who didn't throw for 4,000 yards. Obviously, we don't assume Anthony Richardson is going to throw for 4,000 yards. So let's look at those guys. You got Daniel Jones, you got Jalen Hurts, and you got Justin Fields. Jalen Hurts threw for right over 3,700 yards, had 22 touchdowns and 6 picks. Justin Fields had right over 2,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Daniel Jones had 15 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, with right over 3,200 yards. Over the rush, Jalen Hurts had about 165 attempts, about 750 yards, and 13 touchdowns on the ground. Justin Fields had 160 attempts, 1,140 yards rushing, and 8 touchdowns on the ground. Daniel Jones had right over 700 yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground, and had about 120 attempts. So look at those averages. So to be a top 10 quarterback without throwing for 4,000 yards, you need to average about 3,000 yards passing, about 18 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Now, is that obtainable for Anthony Richardson? 100%. You need to average 148 attempts. That's about 8 attempts a game, a little over 800 yards rushing, and about 9 touchdowns. Once again, very doable for Anthony Richardson with his ability to run the ball. So let's look at Anthony Richardson's last year in college. He had right over 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So he's right on pace. He had about 103 attempts, 650 yards, and 8 touchdowns on the ground. So he's right on the cusp of that, 3,000, 18, and 7. He has the rushing ability. He has about 100 attempts, right around 700 yards, and 9 touchdowns. But wait. That was in 12 games. For a 17-game pace, he's well above the averages you need to be a top 10 quarterback, and you're getting him in the later rounds. He's a smash value for me in round 12 or 13. You could punt the quarterback position and grab your league winner in the late rounds. Next, I want to talk about one of the running backs in the top offense in the NFL. That's the Kansas City Chiefs, and we're not talking about Isaiah Pacheco. We're talking about Jerick McKinnon. Last year, Jerick McKinnon finished as the RB20. Right now, he's being drafted as the RB37. So you can say, okay, well, he's not going to duplicate it. He had a good year, but I want the starting running back on that team, not Jerick McKinnon. Okay, so let's look at it. He's being drafted as the RB23 compared to RB20 and Jerick McKinnon. So they're pretty close. So one might say you really have to choose one or the other, right? Okay, Isaiah Pacheco is going into the season hurt. He had surgery. He said he's going to be fine. He led the Chiefs in snaps last year at the running back position with over 600 compared to right over 400 for Isaiah Pacheco. Jerick McKinnon also had 56 receptions, which was 9th at the RB position. He had over 500 yards, which was 4th at the RB position, and he had 9 touchdowns through the air, which was 1 at the RB position. He also had 71 out of the 112 running back targets in the Kansas City offense, which was about 63%. Once again, we're having that argument of starting running backs. He's 4th in the team in targets, right behind Travis Kelce, Juju, and Valdes-Scantling. Well, guess what? Juju's gone. That's 100 targets out the door. His role in the offense is cemented. I understand that, what people don't understand is they're going to say Clyde Edwards pretty much started the year as a starter. Once he got hurt and once he, pretty much went away in the offense, that's when Jerick McKinnon started doing well. Wrong. His role was cemented the entire year. Once Clyde Edwards-Helaire went down, Isaiah Pacheco's role went up, not Jerick McKinnon. Once again, he led in snaps the entire year. You're getting Jerick McKinnon in the 11th round right now, and he could be a steal in fantasy drafts. It can be a solid RB2 for you, but he solidifies your flex position. There's no way I'm passing on Jerick McKinnon in this year's draft. And last, but certainly not least, let's go over Alexander Mattison. So let's talk about Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was the RB11 in 2022, had over 260 attempts, had over 1,100 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns on the ground, had almost 40 catches, 300 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the year as the RB11. Dalvin Cook usually gets drafted in the top 10 range as a RB10. Usually in the first, he usually doesn't go any later than RB10. Alexander Mattison right now is being drafted as the RB21. I'm not saying the Dalvin Cook production goes straight to Alexander Mattison, so I'm not saying draft Alexander Mattison. Dalvin Cook was the RB11 last year. He's going to be the RB11 this year. That's not what I'm saying. But some of the stats might shock you. So very small sample size, but in 6 games, Alexander Mattison had 117 attempts, 477 yards, and 5 touchdowns in those 6 games, which comes out to an average of about 19.5 rushing attempts and about 80 yards rushing on the ground. Now, in 2 of those 6 games, he had what you can call dud games. He had 13 attempts, 41 yards, and a touchdowns on the ground, 3 catches, 29 yards, and 0 touchdowns in one game. In another game, he had 10 attempts, 26 yards rushing, 0 touchdowns, a reception for 4 yards in that game. But 4 out of those 6 games, he had 20 plus attempts. And in those games, he averaged over 23 attempts, over 100 yards rushing, and he had 2 touchdowns. He also averaged over 4 catches, over 45 yards, and 2 more touchdowns in those 4 games. Dalvin Cook had 260 attempts on the ground. He had about 40 targets. You're talking about over 300 opportunities that are out the door. Now, once again, I'm not saying Alexander Mattison just grabs those opportunities and you just force him right into the lineup, but there is an argument to do just that. Right now in the draft, he goes behind guys like Aaron Jones, who, you know, we don't know what that offense is going to be with Jordan Love. Najee Harris, who, yes, he has the volume, but do you really want Najee Harris in the 2nd round? Jamar Gibbs, who is a rookie, yes, he's going to get that. We'd like to think that he's going to get the DeAndre Swift role or what he should have been, but we don't know. They also have David Montgomery on that team, who's going to be on the field a lot. You got Brees Hall, who got hurt last year, coming back from an ACL in the first year, very iffy as an RB1. And then you got J.K. Dobbins, who, yes, his role is cemented in that Ravens offense, who's going to have a workhorse role, but he doesn't really get the receptions. So why are we passing on Alexander Mattison at RB19? He should be in the top 15 at the very least. He has an argument to be on the top 10 running backs. Once again, you can get him in the 4th round right now. There's no way I'm passing on Alexander Mattison. Those are some of my league winners in 2023. Thanks for tuning in to today's video. Remember, subscribe to see more content from me and everyone here at Just in Time Media.